The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under my apartment door in a cream-colored envelope that screamed expensive. I almost threw it away, thinking it was another credit card offer or luxury real estate advertisement trying to reach someone who'd lived here before me, but something made me open it. The Hartwell Foundation Annual Charity Gala, an evening of philanthropy and promise. The Metropolitan Grand Ballroom, black tie optional. My stomach dropped when I saw the sender's name embossed at the bottom. The Hartwell family. My family. I hadn't spoken to most of them in 3 years. Not since the Christmas dinner where my cousin Vanessa had raised her champagne glass and proposed a toast to family success stories, then looked directly at me and added, "And to those who remind us that not everyone can live up to the Hartwell name." The table had erupted in uncomfortable laughter. My Uncle Richard had tried to smooth it over, but the damage was done. I'd left before dessert and hadn't attended a family gathering since. Now here they were, inviting me to their annual charity gala. The same event I'd heard about every year growing up, always spoken of in reverent tones, as if attending made you royalty and not attending marked you as lesser. I turned the invitation over. On the back, in my grandmother's spidery handwriting, "Please come, James. It would mean the world to me." Grandmother Eleanor. I sat down on my second-hand couch and stared at the invitation for a long time. My family didn't understand me. They never had. The Hartwells were old money, the kind of family that had buildings and hospital wings named after them, that summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen, that measured success in stock portfolios and country club memberships. I'd disappointed them in every possible way. Instead of going to Harvard Business School like my cousins, I'd gotten a degree in social work. Instead of joining the family investment firm, I'd taken a job at a nonprofit helping homeless youth. Instead of buying a penthouse in the city, I lived in a studio apartment in a neighborhood my mother called concerning. At family gatherings, I was the cautionary tale, the one who'd thrown away his advantages, the family disgrace. "Why do you insist on being poor?" my cousin Marcus had asked me once, genuinely confused. "You could have money. Real money. You just choose not to." He didn't understand that I'd never felt richer than when I helped a kid find housing, or connected a struggling family with resources, or simply sat and listened to someone who'd never had anyone listen before. But try explaining that to people who measured worth in dollar signs. I looked at the invitation again. My grandmother's handwriting tugged at something in my chest. She was the only one who'd never made me feel small. When everyone else was criticizing my choices, she'd just smile and say, "James walks his own path. That takes more courage than following someone else's." For her, I could endure one night of my family's judgment. I pulled out my phone and texted the RSVP number. James Hartwell. One attending. The response came immediately. "We're so pleased you'll be joining us." I had 2 weeks to prepare myself for the worst night of my year. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. The day of the gala, I realized I had a problem. I didn't own a tuxedo. I'd never needed one. My work didn't exactly involve black tie events. The fanciest thing I owned was a navy suit I'd bought at a department store 3 years ago for job interviews. I considered not going, making up an excuse, but I'd promised my grandmother. I ended up at a rental place downtown, the kind with fluorescent lighting and plastic-wrapped formal wear hanging on industrial racks. The clerk was a tired-looking man in his 50s who measured me with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. "What's the occasion?" he asked, chalking numbers on a piece of paper. "Family event," I said. "Ah." He nodded knowingly, as if that explained everything. Maybe it did. The tuxedo he pulled for me was fine. Not new, but clean and well-maintained. It fit reasonably well after some adjustments. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back. I looked like a Hartwell. The thought made my stomach churn. On my way home, I stopped by the office. It was Saturday, but I had paperwork to finish before Monday, and sitting in my apartment thinking about the gala was making me anxious. My coworker, Maria, was there too, hunched over her desk with a stack of case files that looked ready to topple. "You're all dressed up," she said, glancing at the garment bag over my shoulder. "Hot date?" "Family thing," I said. She made a face. She'd met my family once when my mother had insisted on taking me to lunch near my office and ended up loudly commenting on how depressing the neighborhood was. Maria had witnessed the whole thing. "Good luck," she said. "Remember, it's just one night. You can survive anything for one night." That's what I keep telling myself. I spent an hour at my desk, trying to focus on intake forms and resource referrals, but my mind kept drifting to the gala. What would I say to my cousins? How would I handle the inevitable questions about my job, my apartment, my life choices? My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Is this James Hartwell? Yes. Who is this? Alexandra Chen? We met at the Morrison building last month. You helped my sister find emergency housing, I remembered. A young woman with a teenage sister who'd been couch surfing for weeks, one step away from sleeping on the streets. I'd pulled every string I had to get them into a transitional housing program. How is she? I texted back. That's why I'm texting. She got accepted to community college. Starts in January. She's taking this seriously, James. You changed her life. I stared at the screen, something warm spreading through my chest. She changed her own life. I just opened a door. No. You believed in her when no one else did. That's everything. I saved the message. I had a folder on my phone full of texts like this. Grateful families, kids who'd turned their lives around, parents who'd found stability. On hard days, I read through them to remember why I did this work. Tonight, at the gala, my family would look at me with pity or contempt or disappointment. They'd see failure. But I had this folder. I had these messages. I had the knowledge that my work mattered to the people who needed it most. That had to be enough. The Metropolitan Grand Ballroom was exactly as ostentatious as I'd expected. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from soaring ceilings. Marble columns framed a space that could have housed a small village. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than my annual rent glided across polished floors, champagne flutes in hand, air kissing and networking with practiced ease. I felt like an imposter the moment I walked in. A woman with a clipboard and a professional smile checked my name off a list and handed me a program. The cocktail hour is in the East Gallery. Dinner and the program begin at 7 in the main ballroom. Enjoy your evening, Mr. Hartwell. I took the program and headed toward the sound of conversation and clinking glasses. The East Gallery was packed. Everywhere I looked, I saw people I recognized from news articles and society pages. CEOs, politicians, philanthropists, the kind of people who had people to manage their schedules and their images. And there, in the center of it all, were the Hartwells. My cousins stood in a cluster near the bar, looking like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Vanessa in a red gown that probably cost more than my car. Marcus in a tuxedo so perfectly tailored it might have been sewn directly onto his body. My other cousins, Diana and Christopher, flanking them like supporting characters in the Vanessa and Marcus show. My Uncle Richard and Aunt Caroline held court nearby, surrounded by admirers and business associates. My mother stood with them, laughing at something someone had said, her diamond earrings catching the light. I didn't see my grandmother yet. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and tried to blend into the wallpaper. Maybe I could make it through the cocktail hour without anyone noticing me. No such luck. Is that James? Vanessa's voice carried across the gallery. Heads turned. Oh my God, it is James. Everyone, the prodigal son has returned. The way she said it, with mock delight that barely concealed her contempt, made my face burn, but I forced a smile and walked over. Vanessa, you look lovely. Thank you. She air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume expensive and suffocating. We weren't sure you'd actually come. You've been avoiding us for years. I've been busy, I said. Oh, we know. With your little, what is it you do again? Social work? She said it the way someone might say waste management. That's right. Marcus joined us, his smile sharp. Still saving the world one homeless person at a time? Something like that. That's so admirable, Diana chimed in, her tone suggesting it was anything but. I mean, it takes a special kind of person to choose poverty when they don't have to. I'm not impoverished, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I make a decent salary. I just don't make your kind of money. Right, Marcus said. Decent. That's one word for it. He glanced at my rental tuxedo, clearly noting that it wasn't bespoke. You're still in that studio apartment in, where is it, Brooklyn? Queens. Queens, right. He said it like I'd told him I lived in a drainage ditch. Christopher appeared with drinks for everyone. James? Man, it's been forever. How's the nonprofit grind? Fulfilling, I said. Uh-huh. He handed champagne to Vanessa and Diana. Mom and Dad were just talking about you, actually, wondering if you'd finally grown out of your rebellious phase. My rebellious phase, I repeated. You know, the whole, I'm going to reject my family's values and help the poor thing. We figured by now you'd have realized that making money is actually how you help people. Scale, you know? Impact at scale. I wanted to argue, to explain that impact wasn't just about scale, that sometimes the most meaningful help was personal, individual, human. But what was the point? We spoke different languages. I'm still doing the same work, I said simply. Vanessa sighed dramatically. James, when are you going to accept that you're a Hartwell? We have a legacy to uphold, a reputation, and you're out there working for pennies at some shelter. Youth services nonprofit, I corrected. Whatever. The point is, you're embarrassing the family. The words landed like a slap. Around us, conversations had quieted. People were listening now, watching our little drama unfold. I'm embarrassing the family, I said slowly. Not on purpose, I'm sure, Marcus said, his voice falsely sympathetic. You don't understand how it looks. We're trying to build something here, a dynasty. And then there's you, the family disgrace working with criminals and drug addicts. They're not criminals, I said, my voice harder now. They're human beings who've had bad luck or made mistakes. They're kids who aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. They're families who lost everything in an economic collapse. They're veterans with PTSD who couldn't get the help they needed. Sure, Vanessa said dismissively. Very noble, but let's be honest. You chose this life because you couldn't handle the pressure of real success. You took the easy way out. I stared at her. The easy way out. Working with poor people instead of competing in the real world? Yeah, easy. Something in me snapped. Vanessa, you've never worked a real day in your life. Your father gave you a VP position at the family firm straight out of college. You live in an apartment your parents bought. Your success is a gift you were born into. Her face flushed. How dare! The people I work with are 10 times tougher than anyone in this room. They're fighting battles you can't even imagine, surviving on scraps, raising kids alone, dealing with trauma and addiction and mental illness without the safety nets you've always taken for granted. And they're still trying, still hoping, still believing they can build better lives. Are you quite finished? My Uncle Richard's voice cut through the tension. He'd appeared beside us, his expression thunderous. Yeah, I think so, I said. Then perhaps you'd like to explain what you're doing here. We invited you out of courtesy to your grandmother, but if you're going to insult your family... He's not insulting us, Dad, Marcus said quickly. He's just defensive about his choices. Choices that reflect poorly on all of us, my Aunt Caroline added, appearing at Richard's elbow. Really, James, we've tried to be supportive of your phase. It's not a phase, I said. This is my life, my career, my purpose. Your purpose, Vanessa scoffed. Your purpose is to be a Hartwell, but you've rejected everything that means. You're a disgrace to this family. The words hung in the air. Everyone within earshot was openly staring now. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their pity, their agreement with Vanessa's assessment. There you are, my grandmother's voice was like a lifeline. I turned to see her making her way through the crowd, regal in a midnight blue gown, her white hair perfectly coiffed. At 86, Eleanor Hartwell still commanded respect without saying a word. Grandmother, I said, relief flooding through me. She took my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. I've been looking everywhere for you. Come, dear. I want you to meet someone. She practically dragged me away from my cousins, out of the East Gallery into a quiet hallway near the ballroom entrance. Are you all right? She asked once we were alone. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar, James. Always have been. She studied my face. What did they say to you? Nothing I haven't heard before. Let me guess. Family disgrace? Embarrassment? Wasting your potential? I managed a weak smile. You know them well? Unfortunately. She sighed. I'm sorry, dear. I hope that seeing you after all this time might remind them that you're family. That family is supposed to support each other, not tear each other down. It's okay, grandmother. Really, I'm used to it. That's even worse. She cupped my cheek with one papery hand. You shouldn't have to be used to it. You're doing extraordinary work, James. Work that matters. Work that changes lives. The fact that they can't see that says everything about them and nothing about you. Tears pricked at my eyes. Thank you. Now. She straightened her shoulders. Pull yourself together. The program is about to start, and I didn't bring you here just to be insulted by your cousins. Why did you bring me here? She smiled mysteriously. You'll see. Come on. She led me into the main ballroom, where staff were directing guests to their tables. The room was even more spectacular than the gallery, a symphony of white linens, gold accents, and floral centerpieces that probably cost more than I made in a month. Grandmother, where are we sitting? Table 1, she said. Table 1? But that's the head table. That's for the foundation board and major donors. I know where it is, dear. I'm on the board, remember? She guided me to a table right in front of the stage where my family was already settling in. Vanessa's eyes widened when she saw us approaching. Why is he sitting at our table? She hissed. Because I invited him, my grandmother said coolly. And last I checked, I still have some say in these matters. No one argued with Eleanor Hartwell. We took our seats. Me between my grandmother and my mother, who gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The room gradually filled. Waiters circulated with wine. The ambient noise of hundreds of wealthy people settling in for an evening of dinner and philanthropy washed over me. I opened my program. The evening's schedule was printed in elegant script. Welcome remarks, Richard Hartwell, Foundation President Dinner Service. Presentation of grants and scholarships, special recognition of major donors' keynote address. Mayor Elizabeth Morrison. Closing remarks, my stomach twisted. Several hours of this. Several hours of sitting at a table with family members who thought I was an embarrassment, surrounded by people who would judge me for my bargain tuxedo and my queen's address and my nonprofit salary. I could do this. For my grandmother, I could do this. The lights dimmed. Uncle Richard took the stage. My Uncle Richard's welcome remarks were exactly what I expected. Polished, professional, perfectly calibrated to inspire generosity without seeming desperate. He talked about the Foundation's mission to support education, healthcare, and social services in underserved communities. He rattled off impressive statistics about grants awarded and lives impacted. It all sounded good, noble even. But I'd been in this field long enough to know that charity galas like this were as much about networking and image management as they were about helping people. These donors weren't here out of the goodness of their hearts. They were here to be seen, to be recognized, to add another line to their philanthropic resumes. Still, money was money. If the foundation was actually giving significant grants to organizations doing real work, I couldn't complain about the motivations behind the donations. The first course arrived, some kind of artfully arranged salad that looked too pretty to eat. Conversations bubbled around me. Across the table, Marcus was deep in discussion with a silver-haired man about market trends. Vanessa was laughing at something a woman in diamonds had said. My mother made small talk with the couple to her left, carefully avoiding eye contact with me. You're awfully quiet, my grandmother whispered. Just taking it all in, I said. She patted my hand. Patience, dear. The evening is young. I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but I nodded anyway. The salad was replaced by a fish course, then a beef course, each more elaborate than the last. The wine flowed freely. Around the ballroom, the volume increased as alcohol loosened tongues and lowered inhibitions. At our table, my uncle held forth about a recent business deal. My Aunt Caroline discussed an upcoming charity auction. My cousins traded gossip about mutual friends. No one asked me a single question about my life. It was like I wasn't there. After dessert, a chocolate creation that should have been called sculpture rather than cake, the lights dimmed again. Uncle Richard returned to the stage. Thank you all for that wonderful dinner, he said. Now we come to the heart of our evening, the announcement of this year's foundation, grants, and the recognition of the generous donors who make our work possible. The crowd settled, attention focusing forward. This year, the Hartwell Foundation is proud to award grants totaling $3 million to organizations across the city. Applause rippled through the room. He began reading off the recipients: museums, schools, medical research facilities. Each announcement was met with applause, and a representative from each organization would stand and wave from their table. Then Uncle Richard said something that made me sit up straighter, and a grant of $250,000 to Youth Bridge Services, an organization providing housing, counseling, and educational support to at-risk youth. My organization, my nonprofit, where I worked. I must have made a sound because my grandmother squeezed my hand. Keep listening, she whispered. The executive director of Youthbridge, a woman named Patricia, whom I deeply admired, stood at a table across the room. She looked shocked, her hand over her mouth. $250,000 was a massive grant for an organization our size. It would fund programs for years. This grant, Uncle Richard continued, was made possible by a special donor who wishes to support organizations doing direct service work with vulnerable populations. Let's give Youth Bridge Services a round of applause. The room erupted. I clapped mechanically, my brain racing. A special donor? Who? The grant announcements continued. I heard them as if from a distance. Another youth services organization received a similar amount, then a homeless shelter, a mental health clinic, a job training program. Every single one was an organization I'd worked with or referred clients to, organizations doing the kind of ground-level, unglamorous work that rarely got foundation funding because it wasn't flashy enough for donor cultivation. Someone had specifically chosen to fund the organizations I knew were doing the best work. Who? Uncle Richard finished the grant announcements and consulted his notes. Now we come to one of my favorite parts of the evening, recognizing the donors whose generosity makes the Hartwell Foundation's mission possible. He went through the usual suspects: board members who'd increased their annual giving, corporate sponsors, families who'd established scholarship funds in memory of loved ones. Then his voice changed, becoming more formal. This year we have a very special recognition to make. The Hartwell Foundation has received the largest single donation in its 50-year history. This gift, a donation of $5 million, will establish a permanent endowment to support direct service organizations working with underserved populations. $5 million. The room was silent, everyone leaning forward in anticipation. This extraordinary gift comes from someone who understands firsthand the importance of this work, someone who has dedicated their career to serving others, someone who believes that real change happens not in boardrooms or at charity galas, but in shelters and counseling centers and community organizations. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce the Hartwell Foundation's newest major donor and the founder of the Endowment for Direct Services. He paused for dramatic effect. Mr. James Hartwell. Time stopped. Every head in the room turned toward me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I'd just heard. My uncle was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. My mother's mouth had fallen open. Marcus looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Vanessa had gone so pale she might actually faint. James? My grandmother's voice was gentle. Don't you want to stand up, dear? I turned to her, my voice barely a whisper. What did you do? She smiled. Nothing you didn't do yourself. Now stand up. Everyone's waiting. Somehow my legs carried me to my feet. The ballroom erupted in applause. I stood there frozen as hundreds of wealthy strangers applauded me. My brain couldn't make sense of it. $5 million? An endowment in my name? How was any of this possible? Go on, my grandmother urged gently. Richard is waiting. I looked at the stage. My uncle stood there with a microphone, gesturing for me to join him. I walked to the stage on autopilot, my legs somehow remembering how to function even though my mind had short-circuited. The applause continued, swelling as I climbed the steps and crossed to where my uncle stood. He handed me the microphone with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was as shocked as everyone else, I realized. He hadn't known about this either. The applause gradually faded. Hundreds of faces looked up at me expectantly. I cleared my throat. I don't know what to say. Start with thank you, someone called out. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Thank you, I said. Though I'm not entirely sure what I'm being thanked for. I'm as surprised as all of you. More laughter, warmer this time. I looked at my grandmother. She nodded encouragingly. I think, I said slowly, that I owe everyone an explanation, because until about 2 minutes ago, I had no idea I was making a $5 million donation to anything. Confused murmurs spread through the ballroom. 3 years ago, I continued, my grandfather, Eleanor Hartwell's husband, passed away. He left me something in his will. Not money, at least not directly. He left me a trust that I couldn't access until certain conditions were met. This was news to my family. I could see the shock on their faces even from the stage. My grandfather and I were close, even though we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. He was old-school Hartwell, built his fortune from nothing, believed in hard work and discipline and traditional success. When I told him I wanted to be a social worker, he was disappointed. I smiled at the memory. But unlike the rest of my family, he never stopped talking to me about it. We'd have these long debates about wealth and responsibility and what it means to live a meaningful life. He thought I was naive. I thought he was out of touch. But we kept talking. I paused, collecting my thoughts. Before he died, he told me something. He said, James, you chose a hard road. I don't understand it, but I respect it. If you stick with it, if you're still doing this work in 5 years, still committed to serving others even when your family thinks you're crazy, then I'll know it's real. I'll know it's not just youthful idealism, but actual conviction. And if that day comes, I want to support you. The room was absolutely silent now. The trust he left me had one condition. I had to work in nonprofit direct services for 5 consecutive years, earning less than a specified salary threshold before I could access the funds. He wanted to make sure I was serious, that I wasn't just rebelling against the family, but actually committed to this path. I looked at my grandmother again. She was crying, but smiling. 3 weeks ago, I hit that 5-year mark. I got a letter from an attorney I'd never heard of, informing me that I now had access to a trust worth $6 million. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. My grandfather earned that money through his business ventures. He believed in capitalism, in entrepreneurship, in building wealth, but he also believed, somewhere deep down, that wealth comes with responsibility, that if you're lucky enough or smart enough or privileged enough to accumulate money, you have an obligation to use it to help others. I felt tears building in my own eyes now. He didn't agree with my choices, but he respected my commitment, and he wanted to give me the resources to make a real impact in the field I'd chosen. I held up the microphone. So, yes, I'm donating $5 million to establish an endowment for direct service organizations. Not because I'm trying to prove something to my family, or because I want recognition, or because I'm trying to buy my way back into everyone's good graces, but because this is what my grandfather would have wanted, and because I've spent 5 years watching incredible organizations struggle to fund the essential work they do. If I can change that, even a little, then his money will do more good than he ever imagined. The applause started quietly, then built to a roar. People were standing now, a standing ovation that made my face burn with embarrassment and pride in equal measure. I handed the microphone back to my uncle and practically fled the stage. My grandmother met me at the bottom of the steps and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she whispered. "I'm so proud." "You knew about this," I said. "You knew the whole time." "Of course I knew. I helped him set up the trust." She pulled back, her eyes shining. "He made me promise not to tell anyone, not even you. He wanted you to make your choices without the knowledge that money was waiting. He wanted to know if you'd stick with it even when it was hard. Why didn't you tell me after he died?" "Because the terms of the trust were clear. You couldn't know. If anyone told you, you'd forfeit everything. It had to be a genuine 5 years of commitment, not 5 years of waiting for a payout." I shook my head in disbelief. That devious old man. "He loved you, James, more than you ever knew." Behind us, the program was continuing. My uncle had recovered enough to move on to the next part of the evening, though I could hear the shake in his voice. The mayor was approaching the stage for her keynote address, but I wasn't paying attention to any of it, because my family was approaching, my mother, my uncle and aunt, my cousins, all wearing expressions I'd never seen before. My mother reached me first. "James, I had no idea. Neither did I until recently. Your grandfather never told any of us about this." She looked lost, confused, like the world had suddenly tilted on its axis. "He left you $6 million? "Technically, he left me a test," I said. "The money only mattered if I passed." Marcus appeared at her elbow. "I don't understand. You've been working at that nonprofit for 5 years. 6, actually. Living in that tiny apartment, taking the subway, shopping at discount stores, all while you were secretly wealthy. I wasn't wealthy. I was working toward becoming wealthy. There's a difference." "But why?" Vanessa's voice was almost plaintive. "Why not just take some corporate job for 5 years, satisfy grandfather's conditions, then quit and live off the trust?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized she genuinely didn't understand. None of them did. "Because that would have defeated the entire purpose," I said. "Grandfather didn't want me to pretend to be committed for 5 years. He wanted me to be committed, to prove that this wasn't a phase or a rebellion, but an actual calling. And the only way to prove that was to do it without knowing a reward was coming." "But you sacrificed so much," Diana said. "You could have been comfortable. You could have had nice things." "I have everything I need. You drive a 15-year-old car. That runs perfectly fine. You live in a studio apartment in Queens. That's clean and safe and close to my work. You shop at Target." Vanessa said this like it was a cardinal sin. "So do millions of people, Vanessa. It's a store, not a mark of shame." Uncle Richard had been quiet, watching this exchange with an unreadable expression. Now he spoke. "James, I owe you an apology." I blinked. "What?" "We all do." He looked around at the family. "We've spent years treating you like a disappointment, like you'd thrown your life away. We called you the family disgrace." The words hung heavy between us. "We were wrong," he continued. "Not about the money, though obviously we were spectacularly wrong about that too, but about you, about what you were doing. We dismissed your work because we didn't understand it. We mocked your choices because they made us uncomfortable." Aunt Caroline nodded. "You held up a mirror to our values, and we didn't like what we saw, so we convinced ourselves you were the problem." "I don't need apologies," I said quietly. I made peace with your disapproval a long time ago. Maybe you don't need them, my mother said. But we need to give them. James, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't support you. I'm sorry I was embarrassed by you. I'm sorry I let you feel like you weren't good enough when really you were better than all of us. She was crying now, tears running down her carefully made-up face. Mom, she pulled me into a hug. Your grandfather saw something in you that the rest of us missed. He knew you were special, and he trusted you with something precious. Not just money, but a mission, the chance to do real good in the world. Over her shoulder, I saw my cousins shifting uncomfortably. Vanessa especially looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. I'm sorry too, Marcus said, though he sounded more confused than contrite. I still don't get it. Why live like you have nothing when you knew money was coming? But I didn't know, I said. That was the whole point. I made choices based on what I believed was right, not what was profitable. And it turned out that was exactly what grandfather was testing for. So you really were just committed to helping people? That's it? That was your whole motivation? Yes, Marcus. That was my whole motivation. He shook his head. That's insane. Maybe, but it's my kind of insane. My grandmother appeared at my side again. I think, she said gently, that James has had enough family time for one evening. The poor boy looks exhausted. She was right. I was exhausted. The emotional whiplash of the night, from insult to revelation to apology, had left me drained. Come, my grandmother said. Let's get some air. She led me out of the ballroom, through the marble corridors, to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool and clean after the stifling atmosphere inside. We stood there in silence for a long moment, watching the lights of the city twinkle below us. Thank you, I finally said. For what? For keeping grandfather's secret, for believing in me even when I didn't know there was anything to believe in. Oh, James. She took my hand. There was always something to believe in. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy actually doing the work instead of talking about doing the work. The family thinks I'm crazy. The family thinks a lot of things. That doesn't make them true. She squeezed my hand. Your grandfather used to say that the true measure of a person is what they do when no one is watching, when there's no reward, no recognition, no guarantee that things will work out. Most people can be good when there's something in it for them. Very few can be good just because it's right. He tested me. He trusted you. There's a difference. She smiled. And you passed with flying colors. We stood there a while longer, just breathing, letting the chaos of the evening settle. What will you do with the rest of the money? She asked. The $1 million you kept? I don't know yet. Maybe buy a slightly bigger apartment, get a newer car, save for retirement. I laughed. All the boring, practical things normal people do with money. Nothing extravagant? What would I do with extravagant? I don't need a mansion or a yacht or a luxury car. I like my life, grandmother. I like my work. The money just means I can do that work without constantly worrying about making rent. Your grandfather would have loved hearing you say that. Would he? He spent his whole life accumulating wealth. He spent his whole life wishing he'd done something meaningful with it. She looked at me. You're living the life he wished he'd had the courage to choose. Don't you see? He didn't leave you that money as a reward. He left it as a tool, a way for you to amplify the impact you were already making. I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. The endowment will fund organizations doing direct services, I said slowly, working through the implications. Real, tangible help for people who need it most. And it'll keep funding them, year after year, long after I'm gone. Exactly. Your grandfather's money, filtered through your values and your experience. It's the best of both of you. I felt tears building again. I wish I could tell him thank you. He knows, dear. Wherever he is, he knows. Inside, through the glass doors, I could see the gala continuing. The mayor was finishing her speech. Waiters were circulating with coffee and after-dinner drinks. My family was scattered throughout the room, probably still processing what they'd learned. Should we go back in? I asked. Only if you want to. I thought about it. About facing more questions, more apologies, more curious stares from strangers who now saw me as a wealthy philanthropist instead of a failure. Actually, I said, I think I'm ready to go home. My grandmother smiled. Then go home. You've done what you came to do. Have I? You showed them who you really are, what you really value, and you did it with grace and dignity, even after they'd spent years tearing you down. That's more than enough for one night. I hugged her tightly. I love you, grandmother. I love you too, dear. Your grandfather and I both do. We always have. I left through a side exit, avoiding the main ballroom, and found my car in the parking garage. The rental tuxedo felt strange now, like a costume I'd worn for a role that wasn't quite me. As I drove home to my studio apartment in Queens, I thought about the look on my family's faces when they'd learned the truth. The shock, the confusion, the dawning realization that they'd been wrong about me in every possible way. It should have felt like vindication, like triumph. Instead, it just felt sad. They'd spent years judging me, dismissing me, treating me like a failure, and they'd done it without ever trying to understand what I was actually doing or why it mattered. They'd looked at my life and seen poverty, when what they should have seen was purpose. And now that they knew I had money, now that I'd proven I wasn't a failure by their standards, suddenly I was worthy of respect? It didn't work that way. I hadn't changed. I was the same person I'd been yesterday, doing the same work, living the same life. The only thing that had changed was their perception of me, and that, I realized, was their problem, not mine. Monday morning, I went back to work. The office was its usual controlled chaos. Phones ringing, caseworkers scrambling to connect clients with resources, teenagers sprawled in the waiting area filling out intake forms. Maria looked up when I walked in and did a double take. "You're on TV?" she said. "What?" She turned her computer monitor toward me. There was a news article about the Hartwell Foundation Gala, featuring a photo of me on stage accepting recognition for my donation. "Local social worker makes $5 donation to Youth Services Endowment," the headline read. I groaned. Oh no. "Oh yes," Maria grinned. "James Hartwell, secret millionaire philanthropist. I can't believe you never told me." "I didn't know, not until 3 weeks ago." "Right, the mysterious grandfather trust. Everyone's talking about it." She scrolled down to show me the comments section. "Look at all these people saying nice things about you." I didn't want to look. I could already imagine what they'd say. They either praising me for my generosity or criticizing me for having money while working in social services, as if the two were mutually exclusive. "Can we just pretend this never happened and get back to work?" I asked. "Are you kidding? Patricia's been calling for you all morning. She wants to talk about the grant." "Right, the $250,000 grant to our organization." I found Patricia in her office, staring at a letter from the Hartwell Foundation. She looked up when I knocked. "James, come in. Sit down." She gestured to a chair. "We need to talk." I sat. "About the grant?" "About everything." She leaned back. "How long have you known about your grandfather's trust?" 3 weeks, maybe a month." "And you didn't think to mention it?" "I didn't know what to do with it. I was still processing." She shook her head in amazement. "James, do you have any idea what this grant means for us? We can expand our transitional housing program, hire more caseworkers, offer more comprehensive mental health services. This money will change lives." "That's the idea." "But you," she trailed off, then started again. "You've been working here for 6 years. You know what we pay. You know how tight money is. And the whole time, you had access to millions of dollars?" "Not the whole time, and not access, not until I proved I was serious about this work." "Still, you could have quit any time, moved on to something more lucrative. Hell, you could have just lived off the trust and never worked again." "Where would be the satisfaction in that?" She laughed. "Most people would figure out a way to find satisfaction while living on a beach somewhere." "I'm not most people." Clearly. She looked at me for a long moment. "You're not going to quit, are you, now that you have money?" "Why would I quit?" "Because you don't need this job anymore. You don't need the stress or the long hours or the bureaucratic nightmares. You could do something easier, something more comfortable." I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I could," I agreed. "But I don't want to. This work matters to me. The money doesn't change that." "Even though you're secretly wealthy?" "I'm not secretly wealthy. I mean, I guess I am now, but that's not how I think of myself. I'm just someone who got incredibly lucky and wants to use that luck to help others." Patricia smiled. "You're going to keep coming in here every day, taking on the hardest cases, fighting with the system, getting emotionally invested in kids who might not make it?" "Probably. You're insane." "So I've been told." She came around the desk and hugged me. "Thank you, James, not just for the grant, but for everything, for showing up, for caring, for proving that you can have resources and still choose to do the hard, unglamorous work." I hugged her back. "Thanks for giving me the chance." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Clients needed attention, paperwork needed completion, crises needed management, the same as always. But something felt different. Lighter, maybe. Like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. I'd spent so long trying to prove my worth to my family, trying to show them that my choices were valid, that my work mattered, that success wasn't just about money, and I'd failed. No matter what I did, they saw only failure. But then my grandfather had seen something else. He'd seen commitment, integrity, the courage to choose a harder path because it was the right path. He'd tested me without my knowledge, and I'd passed simply by being myself. That was more valuable than any inheritance. The Hartwell Foundation's annual gala was smaller this year, more intimate. My grandmother had insisted on scaling back, focusing less on spectacle and more on substance. Last year was about impressing people, she'd told me. This year should be about actually helping them. I'd helped plan it. That felt strange at first, me, the family disgrace, suddenly involved in family business, but my grandmother had been insistent. You know the organization's doing the best work, she said. You know what they need. Why wouldn't we want your input? So I'd helped select grant recipients. I'd reached out to nonprofits. I'd even convinced the foundation board to focus more on direct services and less on flashy projects that looked good in press releases. Some of the family had embraced the changes. My mother had started volunteering at a homeless shelter. Uncle Richard had restructured his firm's charitable giving to support more grassroots organizations. Others, like Vanessa and Marcus, still didn't quite understand, but they were trying. That was something. Tonight, as I looked around the ballroom at nonprofit leaders, caseworkers, and community advocates, I felt something I'd never felt at these events before: belonging. These were my people. Not because we shared blood or last names, but because we shared values. You look happy, my grandmother said, appearing at my elbow. I am happy. Good. You deserve to be. She patted my arm. Your grandfather would be so proud of what you've built. We've built, I corrected. None of this would exist without his trust. Literally. She smiled. True. But he provided the resources. You provided the vision. On stage, Patricia was accepting this year's grant on behalf of Youth Bridge Services. She was talking about the 17 young people who'd successfully transitioned into independent living, about the new counseling program, about the partnerships with local schools. And none of this would be possible, she said, without the support of visionary donors who understand that real change happens one person at a time. People like James Hartwell, who proved that you can honor your family legacy while also honoring your own values. She looked directly at me. Everyone turned. I didn't feel embarrassed this time, just grateful. Last year, Patricia continued, James made a donation that shocked everyone, including himself. But this year, I think we've all come to understand that it wasn't about the money. It was about the commitment, the belief that every person deserves dignity, opportunity, and hope. That's what James has dedicated his life to providing, and that's what the Hartwell Foundation now supports. The applause was warm and genuine. After the program ended, I found myself surrounded by nonprofit directors and community leaders, all wanting to talk about potential partnerships and grant opportunities. We're working with foster youth aging out of the system, one woman said. Could the foundation help? We're starting a job training program for formerly incarcerated individuals, a man added. Would that fit your mission? I listened to all of them, taking notes, asking questions, genuinely excited about the possibilities. This was what wealth could do, I realized. Not buy yachts or mansions, but open doors, create opportunities, amplify the work of people who dedicated their lives to serving others. My grandfather had given me more than money. He'd given me a platform. Later, as the event wound down, Marcus approached me. We'd been civil over the past year, but not close. There was still too much history between us. Hey, he said, got a minute? Sure. We stepped out onto the same balcony where I'd stood with my grandmother last year. The city sparkled below us. I wanted to apologize, Marcus said. Again, I know I said it last year, but I don't think I really meant it. Not fully. I waited. I've been thinking a lot about what you did. Not the money thing, but the whole 5 years of working in social services without knowing anything was coming, and I realized I could never do that. He looked at me. I've only ever made decisions based on what would benefit me, what would make me money or get me ahead. The idea of choosing something just because it's right, even when it costs you, I can't even imagine that. It's not that hard, I said. You just ask yourself what kind of person you want to be, and then you make choices that align with that. But what if the choices are hard? What if they mean giving things up? Then you give things up. If the alternative is betraying your values, then the choice is actually pretty simple. He shook his head. See, that's where we're different, and I don't think I have values like that. Or maybe I do, but they're all negotiable. They don't have to be. Don't they? I mean, look at us. We grew up in the same family with the same advantages. But you became you, and I became me. Why? It was a good question. one I'd thought about a lot over the years. I think, I said slowly, that somewhere along the way, you got the message that your worth comes from what you have. And I got the message that my worth comes from who I am and what I do for others. Different messages, different paths. Can people change? Their path, I mean? I looked at him. Really looked at him. My cousin Marcus, who'd called me the family disgrace, who'd mocked my choices, who'd made me feel small for years. He looked lost. Anyone can change, I said. If they want to, if they're willing to do the work. How do you start? I thought about it. Pick something. One thing that matters to you, really matters, not just something that sounds good. Then do something about it. Not for recognition or tax breaks or to impress people, just because it needs doing. That's it? That's it. Everything else follows from that first choice. He nodded slowly. I'll think about it. Good. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. For what it's worth, Marcus said quietly, I'm glad grandfather saw something in you that the rest of us missed. Someone should get our family's money to do something meaningful. It was, I realized, the most genuine thing he'd ever said to me. Thanks, Marcus. Inside, the last guests were leaving. My grandmother was holding court near the exit, saying her goodbyes. My mother was laughing with Patricia about something. Uncle Richard was deep in conversation with a community organizer about partnership opportunities. My family, still imperfect, still learning, but trying. That was all any of us could do, really. Try. Choose to be better. Choose to see value in places we'd dismissed before. Choose to believe that the measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away. I thought about my grandfather, about the test he'd set for me without my knowledge, about how he'd trusted me to prove myself through action rather than words. He'd called me the strong one. At the time, I hadn't understood, but now I did. Strength wasn't about having money or power or status. Strength was about knowing who you were and refusing to compromise that, even when everyone told you you were wrong. Strength was choosing meaning over comfort, purpose over profit, service over self. My grandfather had spent his life building an empire, but in the end, he'd wanted to build something better. He'd wanted to build me, and then he'd given me the resources to build something that would outlast us both. I looked at the Hartwell Foundation banner hanging in the ballroom. Last year, it had represented everything that made me uncomfortable about my family. The wealth, the status, the self-congratulation. Now it represented something else. Possibility, hope, the chance to transform privilege into purpose. Ready to go? My grandmother asked, appearing beside me. Actually, I said, I think I'm ready to stay. She smiled, understanding what I meant. For years, I'd felt like an outsider in my own family, like I didn't belong because I'd chosen a different path, but I belonged here, not because of money or status or finally living up to the Hartwell name, but because I'd discovered something my grandfather had known all along. The truest legacy isn't what you leave behind, but who you inspire to carry it forward. I wasn't the family disgrace anymore. I was the family conscience, and that was worth more than any inheritance.